Hello, my name is Vance Bergeron, and with this first slide, I would like to present myself. You can see that I'm in a bicycle or tricycle racing in the 2016 Cyberthon. I would like to share with you today our research effort. It's a transversal research effort, and I would like to share with you the fact that we need many tools to bring together to accomplish our common goal, which is to help people who are in handicapped motor situations to walk and to regain their mobility. This slide is coming from my physics background. We like to work with non-dimensional numbers to help us guide ourselves. And it also presents a patient-driven approach. What I do here is I define a caveman number, CA, which is CE divided by AV, and we want this number to be much less than 1. Let me explain. C is the cost of the treatment, A, the availability, V, the value to the patient, and E, the ease of use. We want this number to be very low. So if you look at the units, we want the cost to be down, and we want the time to use it down. So we want that to be low. But we want to increase the number of items available and also the patient satisfaction and the number of patients. Putting this all together, you find that you would like the number to be much less than 1. The schematic shows the evolution of man walking, from ape to man in his present form. What we're going to is man tomorrow, which is some sort of combination of stimulation with an exoskeleton. I'm convinced that the two will eventually lead us to the goal of a satisfying walk that will allow people to have mobility in their everyday movements. And this will eventually be the conclusion to my slide. Some combination of stimulation and exoskeleton that puts all the technologies together to create the outcome, the desired outcome, which is walking and regaining our mobility. What I'd like to do with this slide is introduce functional electrical stimulation cycling. It's not an exoskeleton with stimulation for walking, but one for riding your bike, or rather tricycle. With spinal cord injuries, our brain no longer communicates to our muscles. We must activate them in another way. Here, you see non-evasive activation, where a box in the back of the bike is connected to electrodes that are strapped to the external piece of the leg, the quadriceps here. When the crank angle is identified as the place to push, these quadriceps will be activated and push the pedals in the appropriate way. We can use several different muscles, like the hamstrings and the buttocks, to complete the cycling and make it a uniform movement. This particular type of exercise is particularly important because it helps to develop the muscles that we will need for walking. So even if it's not directly related to gait and walking, it is related to overall health and building the muscles that we need to accomplish this. So in part of any program, we emphasize that exercise is key. Simply using a stimulator to help us walk is not enough. We need muscles. And this is a convenient way because it's easy and has a very low cave number. So this is where we would like to take and use these types of concepts for walking. Here, I would like to share with you a generic problem that comes up whenever you're trying to integrate stimulation with an exoskeleton system. Here again, it's cycling, it's not walking, but it is typical of the type of situations we come up with. Colored in red, blue, and green are the different muscles corresponding to the QR, which is the quadriceps, H, which is the hamstrings, and G, which is the glutes, the buttocks. You're looking at a circle corresponding to the pedal angle in a cycling exercise. And you see that the shaded regions correspond to when you would stimulate the different muscles, and then when you would stop stimulating the different muscles. What's interesting is that at rest at 0, the stimulation pattern is different than when you're at 50 RPMs per se. You see that on the left-hand side, when you start out at around 60 degrees. But then, when you start pedaling, you must anticipate the fact that your leg will be moving during time, and you should send the signal a little bit earlier so that when your leg does get to 90 degrees, it is the most efficient position to produce torque. So what we learn here is that we have to anticipate the motion. We have to be able to stimulate and anticipate when motion is going to occur and the different time scales that the stimulation will take to effectuate its job. And this will be something very generic to any system that is integrated with an exoskeleton. So I leave you with that as one of the problems, and then I will share you with another problem that is rather generic to muscle stimulation. Here I expose another generic problem, at least a problem for non-evasive stimulation. I'm not quite sure about the epidural stimulation, and I leave that to the experts to respond. I don't know. But I do know that in non-evasive stimulation, we have a major problem with regards to fiber recruitment. You're looking at a cross-section of a muscle and a nerve bundle. The small circles correspond to the slow twitch nerve bundle nerves, and the larger circles inside correspond to the fast twitch muscles. In a natural physiological motor recruitment, when we want to do something, we activate first the small twitch muscles. And as we need to have more and more power, we activate more and more muscle fibers, and eventually the larger muscle units. Now, if we look off to the right-hand side, if we electrically stimulate these non-evasively, we do exactly the opposite. Because of the lower resistance in the larger fibers, we activate those first. And as we increase our current, our stimulation, we activate more and more, eventually activating everything. Now the problem here is that these large muscle fibers, they fatigue very quickly. And then we see an onset of early fatigue. One of the ways that we've tried to solve this problem is to use spatially distributed sequential stimulation. You'll find the reference below me. What we do there is instead of using a large electrode, we use several small electrodes. And then we spatially distribute the stimulation over the muscle so that not all of the muscle fiber bundles stimulate at the same time. In this way, we're able to increase or decrease, if you will, the fatigue factor by 30%. We can also modulate the frequency, and that's what we're doing now. Now, the combination of this modulated frequency and space helps. It's not the ultimate solution, but it is on the way to solving this type of problem. This slide basically has two purposes. One is a bit of publicity for the Cyberthon, and I will note that this was in 2016. The next one will be soon in November 13 and 14, and I encourage everyone to attend. It will be broadcast internationally. The second purpose is to show you what this FES cycling looks like in real life, the fluidity of the motion that can be produced by man and machine. What's interesting is that the stimulation is exactly as we described earlier, and I'm on my tricycle competing in the 2016 Cyberthon. What I would like to do is to take special note of the fact that the smooth motion that is produced Here we find that if you did not know it, you would not think that I was tetraplegic. It looks like someone normally just cycling on a regular race. And I want to emphasize that because it is the combination of the stimulation and the machine that's allowing us to do that, to provide that fluid, natural motion. And that's exactly what we would like to do for the walking. Create an exoskeleton that will help guide the stimulated muscles to produce a fluid motion that is regular and easy to use without fatiguing the muscles in any extraordinary way. This slide is an interesting one and one of my heroes, Sebastian Tobler. Sebastian brings us through the connection of what we're talking about in my presentation and what we saw earlier with the epidural stimulation. He is probably the state of the art. As you notice, when he's walking here, he's not using a crutch or anything to support himself. It's really amazing. Now, Sebastian did not get here just through his stimulation. He works very, very hard with his physical rehab and other things that he does to promote his health. And so this is interesting because it is a combination, it's the transition and combination of a patient-driven approach with a technologically driven approach. Unfortunately, the cave number here, we would have to evaluate greater than 1. That's because this system is very costly, it's not very available, and it takes a lot of time to set up and get the patient going. Now, we want to reduce all of that, and the team in Lausanne and in Switzerland is working to do that. But they are gaining great strides. What I'd like for you to imagine now is that if Sebastian had an exoskeleton that would help him guide his movements, that we combine the stimulation that he has with a light exoskeleton. I don't think he needs much here, but then we could imagine a gait that could be very smooth and practically imperceptible, like we saw with the cycling, the FES cycling. So that's what I'd like to use as a transition. And in my next slide, I'll bring us back even further, connecting the two works, as you'll discover some of the exercises that Sebastian has developed to get him in the shape needed for this type of walking and procedure. With this slide, I present to you a full body exercise system, which is called the Go Trike, that was developed by Sebastian Tobler and his team. He's the CEO and co-founder of the company that sells the device, GBY, Go By Yourself. What's interesting here is that there's arm and leg movement, and that the arm and leg movement are synchronized in such a way that you would mimic walking. That is, the arm swings in the same way that it would move when you're walking or during a stroll or whatever. The device can be used indoors, which is very convenient because you can use it all year round, but also you can use it outdoors. And this has very high value because it keeps the individual motivated and allows him to have fun. And in any exercise rehabilitation program, that is one of the most important factors that one can have, is keeping the patient engaged. So I highly recommend these types of exercises, and I think that Sebastian is really bringing a new device to the scene. What we can do now is to combine this device with our electrical stimulation so that he's stimulating his muscles at the same time. And that is what we're working towards in the future. And hopefully we can collaborate with Sebastian with our work and develop an even more advanced device to do this. Following up on the last slide, I show you here the exercise bike, the Go Trike, and Sebastian taking it outside and enjoying himself, having fun at the same time while he's doing his exercises and building his strength to further his improvement in walking. I think the most important thing is motivate to movement. And that is what I was trying to allude to in the last slide with respect to activating or allowing people to have fun, to do more and more with their body. So I think this is an excellent example of how rehabilitation in a transversal way is the way to go, and to use all of these devices to optimize the performance. As I begin to conclude, I provide you with a summary slide, which is an excerpt from a recent presentation done by Professor Winfred Mayer. I'll let his voiceover because he's the real expert, and I believe he does a much better job than I could. Enjoy.
Yeah, this is this should show you where we are over time with restoration of walk, which I think is a long story, and the level has somehow saturated to some extent. We have now 50, 60 years of work on this, and the lower three videos are from the 1990s. The upper two, the most actual and spectacular videos from the group in Lausanne. But overall, it is in our cases we have a very nice therapeutic walk. It has high value to verticalize people, to keep the neuromuscular system activated, and I think this is per se already a very big value. But it is not a restoration of gait like it is often promised. I'm sure you are all aware with the classification of the Asia scale, so I don't need to repeat this. But we have in the lower three cases we have Asia A candidates, complete sensory and motor lesion. In the upper scale we have Asia D, which is incomplete. In the lower scale we have surface electrodes involved. In the upper scale we have an implant for epidural stimulation, and the most special patient is in the middle at the bottom. This lady has denervated lower extremities, so she doesn't use neuromuscular stimulation, but she has muscular stimulation because the nerves have disappeared.
So here I leave you with my last slide, which is a series of references that are YouTube clips that we have put on website, which cover our different Lyon Cyber Days. Each one of these talks deals with the expertise of using electrical stimulation for walking and other things. So I highly encourage you to, when you have time, to take a look at these videos. They're very, very well done. And so I'd like to also thank you for listening to this talk, and I would welcome any questions that you might have.